who's ever worked in corporate America has had a boss who's probably a micromanager,
right,
or always looking over your shoulder.
Warren delegates to the point of abdication. So it's always giving praise and rather than criticism. It's always leading by example. It's also admitting mistakes. The smartest people surround themselves with smarter people. My father used to say, if you want to know who you are, look at your friends.
Nobody goes into this thinking, I'm going to scare or be mean to my partner. I'm going to rescue them. I'm going to help them. But that's not how it often turns out.
Today, learn business secrets from one of the richest men in the world. Mary Buffett, author of Warren Buffett's Management Secrets, is here. And later in the show, Dr. Marilyn Krieger, one of the co-authors of The White Knight Syndrome. But up first, Mary Buffett. Great to have you here today, Mary.
Great to be here, Greg.
Well, so for the people who don't know, since you've got that last name, why don't you just explain to us the family history so we know how to connect the dots?
I was married to Warren's son, Peter, for approximately 12 years. We have 2 daughters. And so being a member of the family for that long gave me a unique perspective that most people have never had.
So you got to see firsthand him in action in
Right,
a lot of ways.
Right, in family settings, holidays. Over the summers, we'd spend a couple of weeks at his home in Omaha, and it was amazing.
And this is what, about your 5th or 6th book now?
This is our 6th book.
6th book.
Yeah.
Now, I expected, given the title, management or maybe investing advice, but I didn't expect career advice. You actually have advice in there for people how to decide what company to work for.
Right. We felt that in today's economy and the environment, it was most important for people to look for job opportunities that give them the biggest career advancement. If they are already in a company, to be able to look at that company and see if it's the correct company that's going to give them that opportunity, and for the investor to invest in companies that over the long term are going to produce the greatest profits.
I imagine there's some connection between the two. What should the employees be looking for? How do you know if like, oh my God, I better get out of this company or stay put?
Right. It's much easier if it's a publicly traded company because you can find things online. The kinds of things you want to look for in a company are its per share earnings over the last 10 years. Are the per share earnings going in an upward trend, modestly, but going upward, or are they fluctuating wildly?
So that's a red flag if it's all over the place.
If it's all over the place, it probably means that the company is fiercely competitive, and in the boom years, you get a bonus, and in the bust years, you'll get a pink slip. The other things that you look for in the company are, do they sell a unique product or a service that doesn't really have to change over time? And this is the world of Coca-Cola products, Wrigley's, Budweiser, so on. They have all those profits that they get to redeploy in buying new businesses, which gives employees and managers opportunities to excel or pay big bonuses and better salaries. And then in the service industry, which has the highest profit margins, really, it's very institutional specific rather than people specific. This is the world of H&R Block and Moody's and the Burlington Northern Santa Fe is a low-cost provider. But in those businesses, they're pretty recession-proof. They tend to have the highest profit margins because low overhead, and they can always raise their prices, like American Express.
And not by coincidence, I noticed that several of those, of course, are companies that Warren has invested in.
Yes. Yeah. He owns major stockholder in most of those companies. Yeah.
But also, you go into things about, such as, what he looks for in a good manager, or how to, tell if someone is a good manager, also.
Yeah. A good manager really knows how to motivate his workforce. He's fiercely loyal, honesty, has great leadership qualities. and loves what he does. He's obsessive about the company and the business. Often when Warren buys privately held companies like the Nebraska Furniture Mart or Borsheim's Jewelry, he's bought them with generational management in place. And often he's gotten better deals based on the fact that he would keep management in place. With the Nebraska Furniture Mart, Mrs. Blumkin was offered from a German company $90 million. And she took Warren's $40 million so that her sons and grandsons could continue managing the business, and they still are today.
So he often prefers to keep the existing management in place?
Right. He's not interested in coming into a company and telling management how to run the business.
Well, I think, for me, that was probably one of the most striking things in the book, because I think anyone who's ever worked in corporate America has had a boss who's probably a micromanager.
Right.
Or, always looking over your shoulder, knows your job better than you do, or doesn't know how to delegate, or can't delegate, or won't delegate. But you say that for Warren, those are some of the key principles.
Warren delegates to the point of abdication. He truly believes in his employees. He calls them out, and in annual reports, he praises them for the smallest things and for the large, big home runs. But he thinks that the people that run the businesses are the experts in that business. And he expects them to do their job, and they love their job. So they want to, through his praise and enthusiasm about them, they want to do the best for him, and they usually do.
Well, and what I liked about this, I mean, honestly, to be honest, it almost sounds too good to be true, but then you have to keep the perspective that, well, this guy is the second richest guy in the world. It's not one of just these management gurus who's telling you all these things and that sound good and buzzwords, but he actually, these are things that he lives by and has actually worked for him in a very tangible way. And so, in other words, there's some corporate managers I think you need to listen up.
Yeah.
But can you talk more about micromanagement for a second? You talk about the resentment and the sorts of things that happen when bosses start micromanaging their employees.
Right. Warren really learned it from Charles Schwab, who, when he worked for Andrew Carnegie at U.S. Steel, said, people resent criticism and really flourish under enthusiastic. If you're going to criticize someone, criticize the category. In other words, if it's a banker and you say, John, Greg, I've noticed that your performance in the past has been just tremendous, but of late it's slipped a little bit, and this banking industry is really rough.
Lately you screwed over the whole country.
Well, what can you think of to do? Can you think of things to do to improve it? So it's always giving praise and rather than criticism. It's always leading by example. It's also admitting mistakes, and he looks for managers that are not victims, but they're victors. They can say, look, I've made a mistake, I take responsibility for it, and I move on. And Warren's very supportive of that.
Well, again, it's also refreshing because, not to sound too jaded, but I think that sometimes, again, you think in corporate America it's more about passing the buck or shifting the blame or not taking responsibility.
Right.
So it's kind of nice to hear, again, that somebody does expect people to, and lives by that himself.
Yeah, great managers always take the responsibility because it is their decision. And, Warren teaches them that, saying how many mistakes he has made in the past. And he learned that from his father, Howard Buffett. And he really says, when you make a mistake, take responsibility for it and move on. Don't dwell on it, because that really will come back to haunt you.
We'll be right back with Mary Buffett. Her book is Warren Buffett's Management Secrets. And we are back with Mary Buffett, author of Warren Buffett's Management Secrets. Well, again, going back to your idea of criticism and praise, again, people have this idea that if you get to the top of business, that you must have stepped on a lot of people along the way or screwed them over, and you're just going to throw your weight around and yell and scream at everybody, and maybe that's people's secret dream, I don't know. But so does he
Some
go
people.
does he go around yelling and screaming at everybody, or
Oh,
that seems
gosh.
to fly in the face of what you're telling me.
No, not at all. He, even with the children, he'll always, before criticism, he'll give them some praise. So a person is more likely to listen to you once they're praised, and then they're more open to the criticism. And it doesn't really have to be a criticism rather than an observation. And Warren often will agree, say, I've had that experience in my past. Or if a manager suggests something that he disagrees with, instead of saying, you're crazy, he'll say, that's interesting. And that happened to me, and he'll give them an example, and it really didn't work out. And that way it allows the manager to really not take it as personally. It allows him to learn. And that's the great advantage that Warren teaches his managers, is to really teach your employees and praise them with enthusiasm and object.
And yet, as you said, though, that if somebody does need reining in or needs some advice or guidance, he will ask a lot of questions to kind of point them in the right direction, so that if he really thinks they're going off on a tangent or something.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing he won't stand for is dishonesty. And in that case, it ends right there, because...
Well, and again, a lot of people, I'm not aiming at him in particular, but again, people have this idea that to succeed in business, you must have screwed somebody over, must be just stealing everything. Well, look at...
A lot of people do.
Yeah, like Wall Street.
Yeah.
But so again, it's good to hear that somebody succeeded in a big way without believing that. So you have some examples in the book of, I think, Salomon Brothers is one case where... I guess, can you give us an example of how he really lives by that? It's easy to say that, but you feel that he actually does that.
How he actually praises someone?
Well, I'm sorry. For instance, in Salomon Brothers, when there was a question about whether or not...
Salomon Brothers.
Right.
Oh, Salomon Brothers. Oh, yeah. In the case of Salomon Brothers, really what he realized is there were some people who broke the law. And he came in and he basically said to all of the managers, those people were excused. They were fired, and some of them went to jail. And what he told them really was there's enough money to be made within the edges that we don't have to go outside of the edges. And the fact is, we can make and lose lots and lots of money, but we can't lose 1 cent of our reputation. And that was really the example that he set. And when he stepped in as chairman of the board of Salomon, he got them on the right track. He eliminated the people who had broken the law, and he paid big fines.
Wow. Instead of just saying, we're going to fight him tooth and nail and get the best lawyers we can, and everybody shred everything. And,
right. No, it was absolutely wrong. And he plays by the rules, and he always says that about taxes. Don't try and cheat on your taxes.
They'll find you, huh?
Yeah.
Probably at his level too. They're probably looking.
This is a man who does his own tax return.
Oh, he does.
The last I heard, last I knew, he was still doing his own tax return.
Wow, I would just think it's so complicated.
Well,
but,
yeah. So, that's how he deals with people who are less than honest or do break the law.
But yet, as you say, without breaking the law, but yet he also admits he's made plenty of mistakes.
Yes.
That as far as bad investments. You want to tell us about some of those?
Well, he bought an airlines, U.S. Air, and his joke is, do you want to know how to become a millionaire? Start out a billionaire and buy an airlines. And
I honestly, you start to think, what was he thinking? Because at least today, maybe back then it was a good thing, but...
Well, he learned a lot, and he always learns from his mistakes. There were labor issues that were uncontrollable. There were high costs of gas. He overpaid for a couple of Irish banks, ConocoPhillips, and he readily admits those mistakes, but he rarely makes them twice. So, and he has great advisors around him. Charlie Munger is his partner, and Charlie is really, we call him the abominable no man.
Well, and again, and that's great. We were talking about that during the break, about the idea of, sycophants, or the idea that, let's face it, when you get it to a certain level in business, people feel, you, pardon my language, but kiss the ass's boss, or tell them what they want to hear, suck up to the boss. Is that...
No.
I'm Warren Buffett, tell me how great I am. Is that what he looks for?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. He's one of the people that, as I found in many times that I've met friends and captains of industry while I was in the Buffett empire family, the smartest people surround themselves with smarter people. You know, my father used to say, if you want to know who you are, look at your friends. And Warren's the same way. He always, has a group of people around him that are going to tell him the truth. He absolutely doesn't want to hear himself, being applauded. He wants to hear the truth about something. The bad news, fine. But he surrounds himself with people that he feels are smarter at what they do than he is.
Well, and I also liked some of the things you talk in the book about, one of the things, not having met the guy, but now that I've met you and hear the stories and have read the book, you hear about the fact that he drives a plain car and doesn't have he has a nice house, but not really anything compared with what he can afford or what a lot of people have, in a city like this. And especially being in Los Angeles, where it's all about making a big impression and spending more than you have and everything. How does he feel about that? Why doesn't he have 300 Rolls Royces in the garage and 500 mansions around the country? And
well, I'll tell a little story that we wrote about in our first book, Buffettology, and it gives you the whole mindset of Warren. Warren says, if you took $20,000 today and bought a car, virtually in 10 years it would be worth nothing, certainly in 20 and 30 years, nothing. But Warren has had an annual compounding rate of return of 20% and above for over 40 years. So if you took that same $20,000, in 10 years it would be worth about $151,000, in 20 years $1 million something, and in 30 years $9 million. And he just thinks that's too much to pay for a car.
yeah, I love that quote. Yeah, and it's because people just don't think that way. But that's
right.
But I guess again, he lives his life that way and manages his money that way, and that's why he has what he has.
Money does not give you happiness, doesn't give you health, and Warren he's very comfortable, and he can afford a new car every year. He does use his private jets, and it's really for the shareholders' interest in mind because his time is so valuable. But he's not one to surround himself with the trappings of what the rich usually do. And because of that, he's been able to amass the kind of fortune. Warren likes to have Berkshire to have, 20 billion around in cash, 20 million, just as a little pad. That's the reason he doesn't believe in getting in debt and living beyond your means.
But I take it that's in some kind of interest-bearing account or something that he's giving money on that, or?
Well, he has that. It's interesting with the Burlington Northern. He just took on $8 million in bonds. Now, money is cheap. People would say, oh my gosh, why would Warren take on debt? Well, money is cheap. He's going to pay it off with the profits that Berkshire's other companies are going to make over the next 3 or 4 years, and he'll pay it back in 3 or 4 years. So at the end of the game, it allows him to keep 20 million or so in cash for other opportunities.
And this is actually, despite how horrendous the economy has been and the way that a lot of people were freaked out by what's been going on, this is actually the kind of time when he sees it as more as an opportunity, I suppose.
Yes, Warren likes the bad news phenomena, and he saves for a recession, and that's what he really ascribes to in terms of the long-term investor. It's not short-term oriented. He's not looking for a quick buck. It's all about buying into businesses, not stock markets.
And again, so much these days you think of corporate America all about shareholder value, but this, immediate, this quarter instant gratification for everything.
Right.
Whereas he's always been long-term.
Right, and that's the reason that, mutual fund and managers and so on, they really can't be long-term oriented because they're looking at quarterly results, at yearly results, and if they don't make them, they lose the Rolls Royce and the kids don't go to private school. I think that's from Trading Places or something. But Warren, on the other hand, likes to keep a low profile. He was famous for driving an old VW Beetle in Omaha while he was starting his original partnership, and saving the money for the opportunities that over the long term are going to make him one of the wealthiest men in the world. And we can do the same as regular investors and people.
Well, thank you very much,
My
Mary
pleasure to
Buffett.
be on the
It was
show.
a pleasure. Hope you'll
Thank
come back
you.
for your next one.
Absolutely.
Her book is Warren Buffett's Management Secrets. We'll be right back. And we are back. Joining me now is Dr. Marilyn Krieger, one of the co-authors of the White Knight Syndrome. Great to have you here today, Dr. Krieger.
Nice to meet you, Greg.
So I interviewed your colleague, Dr. Mary Lamia, recently, and she was telling me about those white knights out there rescuing others.
Right.
But I thought maybe we could get into more detail this time. We were talking about some of the general types, but some specific examples you've seen, or I guess the names are changed and that sort of thing to hide the details.
Right,
but,
and we've actually combined cases, so nobody is a real person in the book.
So can you take us through some of the types and then some real life examples? Because I think maybe that way the viewers can recognize themselves or someone they know in those examples.
Sure,
maybe.
so we know what a white knight is first, which is somebody who chronically rescues their romantic partner, repeatedly finds partners who need rescuing. And Mary and I, as I think she mentioned, found that not all rescuers are the same. So we have the overly empathic white knight, the tarnished white knight, and the terrorizing, terrified white knight.
That's the scariest sounding one.
Yeah, they are scary, and it's really sad, actually. Nobody goes into this thinking, I'm going to scare or be mean to my partner. I'm going to rescue them. I'm going to help them. But that's not how it often turns out. So you want an example of...
Yeah, why don't we go through the types and then give some combined case studies of what you've seen.
So in the book, we talk about the overly empathic white knight. Now, this is someone who is driven by her conscience, or his or her. These can be men or women. And we give two examples, but the one I'll share with you, of a woman named Betsy, who repeatedly found guys who needed help, like they couldn't get their life together. In college, they couldn't get their papers done. They couldn't pay their bills. She got herself a good job as a marketing consultant and found this guy and who had an idea for a computer game. But he couldn't keep a job, but she thought it was a great idea, so she thought, I will market his game for him. So they became romantic partners. He moved into her house. She basically managed their life, and it was her idea that I will make this happen for him. She set up focus groups for the game. She even did things like get posters for the house to inspire him, and nothing happened. Nothing happened. So over time, she became resentful that he wasn't pulling his weight, that he embarrassed her by not following through on the appointments that she had set up, but still she stayed in the relationship. And then one day she found that he was seeing other women.
And when you mention resentment, is that common that that they're doing the rescuing, but then they feel resentful about always having to come to the
Absolutely,
rescue?
and it's understandable that they feel this resentment. They put in all this effort, their time, their soul, their energy, and yet nothing happens. Nothing happens. And actually, often the partner can start being resentful that they're in need. And it just goes down and down and down. But for the overly empathic, they end up feeling so guilty about wanting the partner out of their lives that they often don't put the partner out.
They can't let go.
They can't let go, or they would rather, again, they're so driven by guilt, they would rather hurt themselves than hurt their partner. So they stay in the relationship. And for this particular woman, I think she was also very much afraid of being alone, and she didn't have the self-esteem to allow her to say, there'll be other people out there for me. She just thought, I'm so lucky to have this guy, even though he doesn't have a job, even though he was a chronic marijuana smoker, even though he was seeing other women, even though he was embarrassing her.
Just to have somebody.
Yeah.
Just people don't.
I've had them say, well, Marilyn, half a loaf is better than none. And I'll say, not when that loaf is poisonous.
So what are the other types?
Okay, so going to the other extreme is the terrorizing, terrified. If we have time, we'll talk about the tarnished. And these are people who had such a chaotic early childhood that they're so afraid of the world in a way, but they handle that fear with bravado often. So
Meaning that what, they put on a good front? Or
yeah, they handle that fear by seeming tough and in control and in charge, but it can be quite scary. So in one case that we cite in the book, this fellow rescued this woman who was in an abusive relationship. He was actually a very, very wealthy man, and tried to and who had been physically abused as a child himself. He was very controlling of his wife and micromanaged her and her spending. She became angry and would spend wildly. They would have these terrible fights. And he really viewed her spending and the fighting as a sign of disrespect, which is for both this category and the tarnished, shame is a big issue for these subgroups of white knight. These people are often very, very shame prone, and they easily feel shame because they're busy hiding the underlying weakness.
Well, I'm sorry, we're out of time, but thank you very much,
okay.
Dr. Marilyn Krieger. The book is The White Knight Syndrome. I'd also like to thank Mary Buffett, author of Warren Buffett's Management Secrets. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you next time.
Xin cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video này. Hãy like, share và subscribe kênh để các bạn có thể nhận được nhiều hơn những cái video giá trị hơn. Xin cảm ơn và hẹn gặp lại. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please like, share and subscribe this channel by button below. Thank you very much for watching. Peace.